There I am. I think. There I am. There I am. Okay, so let me do live Twitches. Oh, look, it's Deborah Wilkerson's. It's Deborah Wilkerson's YouTube, social media, Twitters. And then what else do I want to do? So here's what I'm going to do, y'all. Well, I guess I should wait until I have at least one person. You'll have to excuse my portable dishwasher in the back. My portable dishwasher dishwashing sounds. Yay, 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 yay. Yay, 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 yay. Okay, let's see if I get anybody here. Whoa. I'm not doing public freakouts, though. I'm not. Twitter. See what I'm gonna do. I wish that it would just embed the video into Twitter. You know what I mean? That's what I wish. But I guess in order to do that, because I stream from so many... Ooh. Hey, girl. Hey, girl. How you doing, girl? So this is what I want to do. I'm letting my beard grow out again. I know not everybody loves that, but you know what? I gotta do what I want to do. So this is what I'm gonna do tonight. I'm going to paint my nails. I'm gonna paint these nails. Yeah. Yeah, honey. Gonna paint these nails. You like that? You like when I paint these nails? But I'm gonna do it a little different this time. And here's what I mean. Oh, well, I had one viewer and now they're gone. I had one viewer and now they're gone. I almost feel like maybe what I should do. Maybe what I should... I don't know. What I should do. Look at that freckle. There we go. Hello, gorgeous. Hello, gorgeous. Maybe I could do my Periscope if I have no audience here. Because, see, the thing is that Periscope will just embed it in my Facebook. Periscope producer. Well, now I have one viewer again, so maybe I should just continue. Maybe I should just continue on the YouTube. That is what I'm going to do. You know what? Because the thing is that you got to be consistent. You know, if you're doing one platform, then you have to stick with that platform. Now, I know they say not to shake. Not to shake, 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 but I can't help it. The music makes me feel so alive. I got to shake. You know what I mean? 2 viewers! 2 viewers! Oh my gosh, I'm gonna squirt. I can't play any music because then they'll flag my video, like Valerie Cherish. They'll flag it. Hold on, I have to get my clips. Clips. Get my clips ready. Where are my sound effects? There we go.
Oh, there must be some mistake. I'm not sick. Except for the burning sensation and the discharge, I feel fine.
So what I normally do when I do my nails, and it takes forever to do, I do a base coat, and then I do 2 coats of the paint, and then I do a top coat, okay? And the thing is that even when I do all of that, it comes off in a week anyways. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm really just gonna try to do just 2 coats, no base coat. No base coat. You got that? See, I like to do this thing where, you know, in the 80s, they used to have something called a coke nail. And a coke nail was when a girl of a certain age would have a super long pinky nail. And that was the nail that she used to dig that cocaine out of the bag and stick it up her nose to do her cocaine. And that was not Christian. That was not Christian. So, but I do like to have I won't call it a coke nail, but I like it like a jazzy nail, you know, so this is like silver glitter, okay? But then I like the rest of the nails to be black because I'm trying to pick up my style game a little bit. Gotta wash this hair tomorrow. Okay, so what I like to do, what I've learned, I have to just pay attention. Pay attention, please. That's what Daniel Staub said to Teresa. I may just do one coat. She said, pay attention, please. And Teresa said, don't tell me to pay attention. You know, like it's the worst thing in the world. To tell somebody to pay attention. That's when I had to put on my glasses. Now here's the thing. You know, normally I have my really cute glasses, my Ray-Bans, you know, and they just look amazing. I love them. However, I will tell you that these glasses that I just got at the Target for $10, those were much more expensive. They're not as cute. I mean, they're not unfashionable, but they magnify better than my expensive ones. So they do the job better. It's this is function over fashion. The others are fashion over function. So what I like to do is I like to do these nails first before I do the big nail, because if I start with the big nails, then it gets messy. Okay? So when I'm done with those, and then I don't pay attention as much on the smaller nails. I know it doesn't make sense, but it's just my OCD. You got to do what works for you. And this is what works for me. Yeah, I think I'm going to only do one coat. See, I got it in my head last night. I was thinking, I thought, I need to clean these glasses. I thought I would paint my nails more often if I didn't have to do 4 coats every time I did my nails. It just takes too long, and then you have to wait a couple minutes between each coat, and it's just a whole ordeal. And then sometimes when you put too much paint on, it's just too much. So I thought to myself, I said, you know what? It's not that serious, Ragan. Why don't you just do 1 coat, which this looks fine, right? Just do 1 coat. And then it's not that big of a deal if you have to paint normal times. Or multiple times a week. Be like Jerry Blank. It's like, let's paint our clitorises.
You have syphilis.
No.
Not only that, it appears that your syphilis is infested with crabs, and those crabs are carrying gonorrhea.
Okay, now this is the really hard part. This is, if we were in the circus. Hi, Stardust Love. Ragan, please watch Search Party on HBO Max, episode 4, or season 4, episode 2. About 10 minutes in, they stole your rant against Rachel. Okay, I'll definitely check. I love Cola Scola, so I like a lot of people in that cast. So I've been meaning to watch it. The next thing I'm gonna watch, though, is my friend Debbie was telling me about the Heaven's Gate. And she kept saying, oh my God, Heaven's Gate is so good. Heaven's Gate is so good. And I thought it was just like a scripted show on HBO. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to watch it. But then I found out it's a show about a cult. And then I got really interested. So this is not my writing hand, and that's what makes it so difficult. Concentrating. Okay. You just have to do it real slow. And you have to like move your hand that's being painted when you're painting the hand that you write with, rather than... It's an odd skill. Good, Ragan. I'm actually surprised that I'm doing so well because I haven't painted my nails. In such a long time. It's like I'm afraid to talk while I'm doing it because then, I mean, look at this. That's pretty darn good for a boy. For a boy. That's my not, hold on. We'll get there. We'll get there. So proud of myself. Got no husband to share this accomplishment. I hate how that camera gets out of focus. Get into focus. Get into it. Marshall Temple, I was your first like. Marshall, you were my first. Marshall was my first. He popped my cherry. The first like to this video, Marshall? Oh my god. Now there's blood all over my chair. You gotta warn a girl. You gotta warn a girl. So I had a really tough weekend, I have to tell you. I do need to tell you. I don't know if I want to get into the particulars of it on my YouTube. But I guess why not? So there's this guy, well, I should preface this by saying that in another life, I was a poetry slammer. So I'd go and participate in poetry competitions, and in fact, you can go onto my YouTube. There's still plenty of videos up of me performing poetry, and I advanced to the individual finals at the National Poetry Slam, where I placed third in the nation. Third in the nation! And got to perform in front of, you know, an audience of probably 1,000 people. It was very special moment that I worked very hard toward. But after that, I decided to stop doing poetry or performing poetry in public. And one of the reasons why is because there's a tendency in Poetry Slam for most of the poetry in Poetry Slam is first person and autobiographical. And you know, one of the great things about Poetry Slam is that it provides an opportunity for people from historically marginalized groups, such as gay men, to share stories about the shit that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I'm done with my nails! That was so fast! That was so fast. I'm so proud of myself. And I didn't do a splotchy job or anything. See, when you have to do 4 coats, then it can get splotchy, but this is good. This is good. And then I'm gonna see how long it lasts. If doing this lasts just as long as the way I normally do it, then boom. I'm in business. She's back in business now. Okay, so one of the reasons why I got out of Poetry Slam is, oh, hold on.
Should I remove my clothes?
I don't think so.
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
Why don't I remove my pants and panties?
Oh, Deborah Wilkerson is in the room. We got to get rid of her. We got to get rid of her. Cart her away.
Noblet, cut away. Nice try, young lady.
I'm not retarded. No! I'm not retarded. No!
Just get rid of her. Just get rid of her.
Where's the bathroom?
Where isn't the bathroom?
Jeez, wear a catheter. Go in the corner.
Okay, so one of the reasons why I left Poetry Slam is because so much of the time people do these poems where they're this enlightened. They're enlightened. They get it. No, and here's the way that they have been victimized. And I'm guilty of this too in a lot of my poetry, especially for my Poetry Slam days. And they're never the villain. They're only the heroes in their own stories. And that gets a little tiring. It just gets a little tiring to hear when you're at a Poetry Slam and you have to listen to 2.5 hours of poetry at an event and everybody's like, you're getting the loudest clap for who's the most woke, right? And to me, the more interesting writing is when you implicate the self and when you're willing to be like, yeah, I fucked up. Sometime I'm an asshole and I'm a villain. And just not many people were willing to do that. So I got out of that situation. And also I think that there's a tendency whenever you realize a goal, it's kind of like if you finish a video game and you're like, okay, well, I won that game. I'm bored. I'm gonna move on. So, okay, at any rate. So there's this guy who is in my field, and he wrote a piece about a decade ago about his experiences in the Los Angeles performance poetry community and his home venue. And he's a person of color, and he's heterosexual, and he's somebody who I actually liked before everything that I'm about to tell you. So he wrote a piece about, his experiences, and his venue is 5 blocks away from my house, which, I live in the heart of West Hollywood. And the piece in part chronicles how homophobic this venue is, how it's not, in his words, a safe space for queer folks. And in the last third of his piece, he talks about how he uses the term no-homo, which, if you don't know everybody knows what no-homo is at this point. It's like when it derives primarily from hip-hop culture, and it's when straight people primarily will search their language for opportunities for something that might be read as gay, and they say no homo. So it's an anti-gay epithet, like, hey, I got your back, no homo, right? But that rhetorical practice is grounded in sort of rhetorical violence against sexual minorities, right? And I've read blogs by queer people of color who've also talked about the queer potential of no homo, where they say, okay, like, first, I'm going to acknowledge that this is homophobic. However, one other way of reading it is that you have these straight guys who are, who many of them are very scared of being read as gay, but they're constantly searching their language for opportunities to queer it. And that is a very compelling argument to me. But you have to be very careful when you're making that argument, because speaker location matters. In other words, a queer person of color, it makes sense to articulate that argument and say, hey, like, here's a way that we can kind of reappropriate language or think about language in a different way. But that does not give license to a heterosexual man to adopt that practice and suggest that they are doing it in an ironic way when they're speaking it in a venue that they say is anti-gay, okay? So the reason why this all came about is because in 2019 in the fall, I taught a graduate seminar that was all about using research to investigate the self and performance. So the first third of it, we did poetry slam. The second third, we did personal narrative. And the third part of it, we did autoethnography. And I assigned this guy's piece in the class. A lot of times when I'm putting together a new seminar, I'll look for potential readings to include in my syllabus and, in the class. And I typically will just kind of like skim through, especially the first half of the reading, to make sure, okay, yeah, this is good. It's a solid piece. And I made that mistake with this piece. So I didn't read the piece in its entirety until the week it was due. And his really problematic argument about No-Homo was buried in the last third of the piece. So I read it and my jaw dropped. I was hurt for so many different reasons. The first of which is this is an acquaintance of mine, somebody who I at the time liked and respected. Number two, I had dedicated a decade of my life to poetry slam and had suffered the slings and arrows of homophobia so much participating in that activity. I would get up and perform these gut-wrenching pieces about surviving anti-gay violence, and then I would have straight men come up and read poems where they say stuff like the faggoty Elton John Candle in the Wind song, just after I've gotten done and left the stage and completely unmoved, right? And so third reason, I live, as I said, literally 5 blocks away from this venue. I live in West Hollywood, and to have such a homophobic place, by his description, was very hurtful to me. And then finally, the piece that I assigned was published in a journal, or is published in a journal called Text and Performance Quarterly, and I think I'm one of the most published authors in this journal's history, and certainly the most published author over the last, I'd say, 20 years. And so I'm on the editorial board of this journal. So the fact that this piece made it through the editorial process just stung. So I went onto my Facebook, and mind you, I'm a very, I know I'm doing a YouTube right now, and in some ways I'm very public with certain things, but on Facebook, I'm not that way at all. I currently have, I think, like 148 friends on Facebook, whereas other people have like 5,000 friends on Facebook. I'm not that way. So when I share something on my Facebook wall, it's not to this big public audience. It's not like my Twitter feed where I have, however many, tens of thousands of people who follow me there. It's a very, very limited audience. And so I went onto Facebook and I posted about my reservations with the piece. I just wrote a paragraph and I said, hey, this guy wrote this piece and it's somebody who I have a good history with, and I think he's a nice guy, but I find this deeply problematic, as is my right. So somebody who I was friends with at the time is a mutual friend with the author of this piece, and somebody I'm not friends with this person anymore. They back-channeled me and said, hey, I think it's fucked up that you did this, and the suggestion is that I am somehow violating some sort of trust or acting in a fucked up manner that I posted this in a quote-unquote public forum. So I pointed out, hey, look, you have 4,300 friends on Facebook. So when you frame Facebook as a public forum, you have to understand that your use of Facebook is not at all consistent with the way that I use Facebook. Yeah, if I had 4,400 friends on Facebook, it would be potentially fucked up if I did that. So, at any rate, a year and a half goes by, and on Friday, I see that this person has left a post, the person who authored the piece. Finally, they're responding. I wrote this anti-racist piece about things that had happened in our national organization. Basically, there was a big stir-up, a big controversy. I don't want to get, into all the ins and outs of it in the National Communication Association. So I was one of several people who stuck their neck out on the line and said, this is wrong, we're not going to tolerate it anymore, we're not going to take it. And my friend Mohan Dutta and I co-authored a post that talked about taking an anti-racist stance in our organization. And so, and it was a widely disseminated post. And so a year and a half later, this guy puts a comment on it that says eye roll. And immediately I knew what it was about. And I was just thinking to myself, oh, you don't want to do this, honey. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do it in this public of a forum. That's actually because there are like 3.7 thousand people who are a part of this forum. It's going to force me to get specific about what my concerns were with your piece. This is just not how you want this to go down. And I figured at some point he would probably approach me and want to have a conversation about my reservations with the piece. That's the thing. When you do critical cultural work, you publish and sometimes you make mistakes. And then you have conversations with people who point out, hey, like when you wrote this, it hurt me, or have you thought about this? Like in my poetry, I used to appropriate, like I had one poem called Faggot, which was all about how harmful that term is. And I appropriated the name of the play for colored girls, and I switched it around to a chiasmic illusion where I said, for gay boys who have considered rainbows when suicide wasn't enough. And then I invited, in a retrospective of my work in that Text and Performance Quarterly Journal, I invited my friend Karma Chavez to do a response piece. And I told Karma when I invited her to be one of the people responding to it, because she's heavily invested in feminisms of color and intersectionality, I said, I don't want this to just be like a celebratory piece. I want you to engage critically in the piece. And she talked about like how problematic it was for a white queer man to appropriate the rhetoric and aesthetics and traditions of women of color and do it unreflexively. And I grew from that exchange. I mean, the point of authoring critical cultural scholarship is not to come at it from a poetry slam perspective where you're always the hero, but the entire point is to generate conversations and to grow. Not just your reader, but you as well. And so when I said question mark in response to his eye roll, and he said, oh, that was about you and you know why. And I was like, oh no, because now we're really going to have to get specific about it. And I said, oh, is this in response to me calling out the inherent homophobia of you a straight man celebrating your use of the term no-homo at a poetry slam venue that you describe as homophobic and not a safe space for queer people? And then he said something like, so I'm really articulating my concerns with his homophobia in very specific, unambiguous terms. And his response was, okay, white man, or bye, white man. And I, going into it, I didn't want to be ad hominem. I wanted to, because that's kind of like where my reflex is to go, just from being bullied so much as a kid, that when I feel like somebody is not treating me fairly, I go for like the cheap, low-hanging stuff. And so through therapy, it's something I've tried to get better at. Like, stick to the argument. Don't go for like a personal attack, but you have to remember to breathe, and it's a practice, and sometimes I don't do as well. But so when he said, bye, white man, or something, I said, bye, homophobe, no homo. And the minute I put it out there, it was like, ugh, I wish I wouldn't have dropped to that level. Like, just stick to the argument, Ragan. That's what's important. That's the important part of the conversation. And he said, bye, racist. And I said, okay, well, I've clearly articulated to you why I think what you said was homophobic. Do you care to explain why you think that I'm a racist? And let me just stop here and say that I teach critical race theory in almost every single class that I teach. And so on a philosophical level, I completely understand that by virtue of the culture in which I am embedded, that as a white person, I have unearned privilege, and that racism is baked into our social communicative structures, and that I am a recipient of some of those advantages, and that there are times that I do err. And I think that racism is built into our socially constructed notion of whiteness. I mean, I do. But there's a difference between having that sort of philosophical conversation and a very pointed, like me saying, hey, when you wrote this in a published essay, I found this homophobic, and your response is just to kind of say, you're a racist. Well, I'm not a racist just because I'm pointing out that a person of color said something homophobic, right? So when I probed, he was like, just like a white person to think I owe you something. I don't. I can't believe I remember the details of this exchange in such clarity, but I do. Because it was just, it was hurtful. It was even, if not as hurtful, it may be even more hurtful than what I was initially responding to in his essay. And so at that point, I kind of understood that there was no point in having any type of productive conversation with him, that it wasn't going to go anywhere. And so I just kind of like made my case, and he described my argument as weak and tried to rationalize his argument in the essay by saying that No-Homo comes from African-American speech traditions, I guess, therefore, because that sort of homophobia is derived from black communities, that as a straight black man, he can't be homophobic by trying to use it in an ironic manner, even though I don't understand how it's ironic when he's using it in a place that is so demonstrably homophobic by his own admission. So that was that. But the way that my brain operates is, I feel like I should, so I said in response,
Kazawazawa?
Isn't she lovely, everyone? I said, isn't she lovely, everyone?
she's lovely. So I was like, no. So the way that my abnormal anxiety works is when my brain latches onto these things, and I will stir over them, and the anxiety just takes over my body, and I'm hyper focused on the thing that's upsetting to me, but then I become also very unfocused, and I can't eat, I lose my appetite, and I just can't breathe properly. I can go 20 seconds without remembering to inhale, and it just really knocked me on my butt, because I felt like I'm being gaslit here. Rather than somebody saying to me, and like I said, I stick my foot in doo-doo all the time. It happens to me. When I helped co-create this Communication Scholars for Transformation page, which here, I'll show it to you now. Oops, that's not where I want to go. Let's see. La-di-da. So this is the page that I'm talking about, where all of this drama went down. And, you can see 3.7 thousand members, which is kind of ironic that he was all, I guess, offended that I went onto my private Facebook page and vocalized my concerns when he took it into that forum, which, again, I've got nothing to hide. Like, I'm definitely not in the wrong here. And he did not do a great job of defending his viewpoint. It just kind of underscored exactly, like, I'm at any rate. So, but that's what you have to deal with. My read of it is somebody very insecure and somebody who doesn't know how to have
a conversation like that. So at any rate, on the Communication Scholars for Transformation page, when right after I co-created the group, I was doing a lot of the announcements for the group, and I would sometimes like leave out disability, and scholars from the Disability Caucus were like, this is fucked up. You keep erasing people with disabilities, and this transformation that you want to see in the discipline, the better treatment and representation of people from historically marginalized groups, can't just be grounded in terms of race and sexual identity or gender identity. You know, you have to think in more complex ways and think about how when you exclude us, that is hurtful, that you're perpetuating a system of domination that you take such issue with when other people do it to you. And my reaction to that wasn't to be like, fuck that weak claim, that shitty argument that you're giving me. Like, I understand the child in us, our ego wants to immediately respond and be like, fuck you. Like when I get reviews for a journal article, and it's, you know, when you get reviews, because you have two blind reviewers, excuse the ableist language, that don't know who you are, plus the editor's reviews, and it's all like, here are all of the ways that this article is shitty. And so I have to do like what I call faux ads, where I'm like, fuck off and die, fuck off and die, fuck off and die, because my brain needs time to process. Like, I need to allow the little kid inside of me to throw a tantrum and to say, you're wrong. But I do that all internally. Like, I do. And this guy has had a year and a half to have that tantrum and to think about things in a more complex way. And this is the road. This is where his road led him a year and a half later. So in the case of the scholars from the Disability Caucus, I immediately was like, you are absolutely right. I apologize. Moving forward, I am going to, number one, try to read more literature about this. Number two, I'm going to be more mindful of inclusive language whenever I talk about the group and the mission and the goals of the group. And look, sometimes my mind slips, and sometimes I'm not always there, and sometimes I may make an argument in an essay that it does not exemplify my best form of argumentation, and especially in artwork and in scholarship that I authored a decade ago or 15 years ago. And I think that if you've authored something, you know, I have poems, for instance, where I use the term tranny because I had no idea that it was an anti-trans slur. I just remember watching Project Runway and hearing Christian Siriano use that epithet, not knowing, I didn't know at least, that it was an epithet. And then Amy Poehler did the Christian Siriano impersonation on Saturday Night Live and was using it, and I used it in a poem. And then when I was teaching my first graduate seminar at Cal State Long Beach, students in the class pointed it out. I did research on it, and I grew from it. And part of being an adult is you have to be able to, like, acknowledge I was in a different place, or I didn't have as complex of an understanding of an issue or a theme or a topic, and I wasn't communicating about it in the right way, and I wish I could go back and redo it, but I can't, and all I can do is kind of own it now and apologize and promise to do better. And so, to me, this guy has had all of these opportunities to kind of do right by it, but it is really telling that you dig your heels in the sand. So at any rate, and to do it in that forum and to do it in response to that post is, in fact, you know what? I mean, since we're here, I just want to read you the post that it's in response to, so you can really get an idea of just like how fucking fucked up it is that he decided to pick this specific place to finally, I guess, take me down, or not take me down, but communicate his upset. Let's see, where is it? Okay, so here's the post. And you'll be able to get the context in the letter of what this is a response to. Dialogic responses by some distinguished scholars. Okay, so let me just explain. So in the National Communication Association, they have this group called the Distinguished Scholars. And the Distinguished Scholars, it's like the highest accolade that you can get in the National Communication Association. National Communication Association. It means that you've just published out the wazoo. You're one of the most recognized scholars in the discipline, and it tends to be like only senior scholars. But since it was created, and the only thing that this group does, the only task that they have is to vote on people who will join their ranks. That's the only thing that they do. And this group is overwhelmingly white. I think later I talk about how over 99% of the group's constitution is white scholars. And so finally, members of the organization, like critical cultural scholars, began to say, this is fucked up. This is racist. This is how racism is built into the structures of our institution, of our parent institution. So then you had some members of the Distinguished Scholars try to say that, well, they didn't want to do affirmative action because then that would challenge the merit of scholars if they just let people in based on their history of marginalization and stuff like that, which is such a bullshit argument that people make all the time, that you have to forsake merit in order to be more inclusive. So at any rate, Mohan and I co-authored this piece, and it was kind of like an open letter. So dialogic responses by some distinguished scholars have acknowledged implicit problems with the letter that they originally signed, removed their names from the letter, and offered pathways for structural transformation of the discipline. For instance, Professor Stan Dietz apologized explicitly for the letter because the distinguished scholars wrote a letter after all the hullabaloo and were trying to justify like why they didn't want to change, which only added insult to injury, which ironically is very similar to somebody pointing out that you're doing something homophobic in your research, and rather than apologizing, doubling down and digging your heels in the sand. I just want to kind of point out the obvious comparison here. So he went on to note structural changes that are necessary in the discipline and processes to address issues of diversity and inclusion. On a similar note, Professor Barbie Zalizer, I don't know how to say her name, removed her name from the letter and noted the importance of diversity and inclusion over questions of organizational decision-making. These letters depict the vitality of owning problems in the initial Distinguished Service letter as the basis of a collaborative imaginary that is diverse and inclusive. In contrast, and disappointingly, several distinguished scholars issued statements that minimized the elitism embodied in the letter, highlighted process issues, and deflected from pain invoked by what many in the field, and particularly scholars at the margins, read as exclusionary discourses. Some of the distinguished scholars who signed Dr. Zarefsky's troubling letter have spent the last few days singing the same problematic refrain. Some members claim they attached their name to the document because NCA's executive committee did not consult with the group, and the nomination process is responsible for 99.04% of their members being white. These claims are troublesome for many reasons. First, it's now common knowledge that the EC... you know what? I don't want to read all of this. I mean, you can kind of like pause the screen, or maybe like I'll put this... maybe I'll post this. But I mean, the big takeaway here is that the letter that I wrote is all about how important anti-racism is within the discipline. So when we scroll down here and he's like, just like a white man thinking someone owes you something, bi racist, without anything to back up the assertion, and doing it in response to this post is really, really fucked up. So I wish that I was the type of person who could deal with foolishness like this and just kind of like see it for what it is immediately and go, okay, this person is just not okay. And it's obvious that they're not okay, and any like objective person is going to read the exchange and see that like the person's not okay. But that's not the way my OCD brain works. Like my OCD brain hooks into it and then I just roll over it, and I had to take 1.5 Ativan on Friday, and then I woke up Saturday and I was kind of okay, and I wrote about the experience, and then on Sunday I wrote about it more, and I just worked myself up into a tizzy over it. And that's kind of what I've been focusing a lot on over the weekend, because the thing about it is, like I said in my Facebook post on my private wall, that I'm being gaslit by somebody who's not particularly good at gaslighting, but it still doesn't make it hurt any less, because I think, this could have been so easily resolved in another way. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, okay, so does the punishment fit the crime of me posting something to such limited audience on my Facebook? And then I thought, no. If I can't write a paragraph about a peer-reviewed essay in a journal that I'm on the editorial board of, and in this essay, it's all about an activity, poetry slam, that I dedicated over a decade of my life to, and the venue that's being talked about is 5 blocks away from my house. If I can't post something about that on Facebook, come on. So, let me read some of these comments. Sorry, I was so on. I obviously had a lot on my mind, and it's something that I've really been thinking about lately. So thank you for letting me vent, for letting me get that out. I mean, really upset. Really, really, really upset about it. And yeah. Okay, Jumapili says, who can accept when someone tells them that their word or actions are violence and say sorry or rephrase, and it's an additional violence to accuse a person such as you of being racist? I don't necessarily think that it's an act of violence for somebody to accuse me of being racist, because I'm sure that there are things that I do that are racist. I'm sure that, there are things that I say unreflexively that might be racist. And I want to be aware of that, and I want to change, and I want to evolve. I mean, I think that I've become increasingly anti-racist over my 44 years of life because of conversations where people have pointed that out. However, saying that I'm racist in response to me pointing out the homophobia of an argument that you've made in a peer-reviewed essay, and me asking you to clarify, okay, so I've pointed out your homophobia, care to point out my racism? And your response is just like a white man thinking I owe you something. It's a little too convenient. So I think that's just an important distinction to make. yeah, Stardust says some people don't want resolution, and that's true. And frankly, with this person, there are things that people can do that make me lose all respect for them. Like, all respect, it's never going to come back, and this is one of those incidents. And I fully admit that maybe that's a childish part of me, but when that's just where I'm at. And I remember when I did Big Brother, you know, one of the things that I wanted to improve upon was I realized that, like, when somebody crosses me and I'm like, fuck that person, and I can be really passive aggressive and cut them out, like I did with Rachel, who was, you know, then my nemesis. And since then we've become friends, and I really value my relationship with her. And one of the things that I've thought about a lot in the 10 years since I did Big Brother is how, like, I don't want to be a person who holds a grudge. I don't. So maybe even saying like, I've lost all respect for the person, I need to temper that with, I also don't want to be a person who holds a grudge. And maybe I need to kind of permit myself to, if somebody earnestly is like, you know what, I thought more about this situation and I want to have a more earnest conversation with you about it, that I should be open to that. Because that's more in line with the person that I want to be, but have not always been. But going back to Stardust's original point, yeah, if somebody doesn't want to have, if somebody doesn't want to grow or have a conversation in earnest, then you can't. Like Debbie and I, we were doing these debate rooms in virtual reality, in Oculus and AltSpace. And we did it because we would see other people having debates, because we were doing this right around the time of the election. And you have people who just get in there to troll. And I'm sure you see it on Facebook, where they're just trying to get a rise out of you, and they're not really, like, invested in having any type of productive conversation. And that's not where I operate from. And that's not what drives me as a human being. And so we wanted to create a space where, like, look, we want to be able to hear people from different viewpoints and really try to understand one another. We don't always have to agree, but I'd like to ask somebody who has a different political opinion why they think the way they do, and try to really get it. And yeah. Stardust also said that, I understand not wanting to hold a grudge, but that's also part of self-preservation. Yeah, I get it. I mean, and that's why I do it, because I feel like if somebody has done me, if somebody hurts me, and I've been really hurt over the weekend, and I realize it's not tough to say that, and I wish that, you know, because, you know, we're all kind of like encultured by this expectation of masculinity in our culture, especially if you're a man, to want to be like, yeah, I wasn't even upset about it, but I was. I was hurt. I was upset. I had this moment. Hold on, I'll be right back. I just want to show you this. So I was hurt in part, and that hurt, like, manifested through the anxiety that was coursing through my veins, and then I just got this minor revision for Text and Performance Quarterly for this essay that is where I talk about my father in the essay. That's not what the essay is about, but I have this anecdote about my father. And in the piece, I talk about effective memory, or ways of better accessing things that have happened from your past. And there's something called sense memory and odor memory. And so after my father died, he had these shirts, and they were shirts that I was never going to wear. So I had them turned into handkerchiefs. So I took them to a tailor, and the tailor turned them into handkerchiefs. Because my stepmother, you know, I didn't get anything of value. None of us did. And but when we went for his funeral, we were handed trash bags, literally trash bags, and said that we could raid his closet. So all I got were, shirts. But the thing that I really love about these handkerchiefs is that when I bury my nose in them, I can smell my father. And, smell is the sense that's most connected to memory. And so in the small revisions that I was doing, I was talking about the odor memory. So I took this out, and I started smelling my father, and I started bawling. I started crying. And part of it was, because I had just been kind of like a pressure cooker all weekend with all of this anxiety. And not that I think that this person who pissed me off is worth crying over. He's not the reason why I was crying. I was crying because it was kind of like an emotionally charged situation, and one that kind of threw me off my game. And so my emotions were just kind of at a heightened point, and so when I smelled this, I just started crying. But it was nice to purge that emotion on some level. I honestly had no intent to come on here and share all of this. I was just here to paint my nails. But it's been on my mind. It's been on my mind. My nails are even dry now. Okay, I think I'm gonna run. Thank you very much for listening to me rant and watch me paint my nails, and for being an emotional support audience. And I hope you have a good night. And I feel better just kind of sharing the story, and hopefully now that I've written extensively about it on my Facebook wall that has 148 friends on it, and now here in a more public forum. But this video, I'm sure, will get fewer views than me writing about it on my Facebook wall. Hopefully, this is how I process things. So hopefully this will help me turn the page on all of that. So good night. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll try to do another YouTube video later this week.
Where's the bathroom?
Where isn't the bathroom?
Where's the bathroom?
I think I'll take a rain check.
A golden rain check. We chopped the beef stew